Welcome to the Being Blackbeard podcast, a show for pirate geeks and TV fans about the show Crossbones. Here are your hosts, Phil Johnson, Tony D'Amco, and Richard Dreiling.
Bucklers, you're listening to episode number 2 of the Being Blackbeard podcast, where we're talking about the NBC show Crossbones, starring John Malkovich. I'm your host, Phil Johnson, and tonight with me is my co-host, Tony D'Amco. Say hi, Tony.
Hi, Tony.
Our other co-host normally would be Rich Dreiling, who is down with sushi poisoning tonight, which is a fantastic reason to never eat sushi as far as I'm concerned. So, Tony, if I remember right, this episode number 2 is called Communion, right? I forgot to write it down.
I believe so, but don't quote me on that.
Okay.
We're off to a fact-filled start already.
Yes, absolutely. We're doing our research like always.
I think Malkovich is in the show. I don't know that.
So this was a pretty interesting episode. They went with a lot of exposition, a lot of backstory on it, all surrounding this other pirate, Sam Valentine, coming to town, and he wanted Eddie Teach. I love how he calls him Eddie. Eddie wanted to sell him this navigator thing so that he could sell it back to the British, so they would assume that Blackbeard is dead and nobody would come get him. Sam Valentine did not want to do that because he didn't want the British to have this navigation device. And so a plot ensues to have Sam Valentine hung for a crime that he didn't commit because Blackbeard perpetrated it on himself. So, Tony, what did you think of the episode?
I still like the show. I was more impressed with the first episode than this one, though I still... let me give you the high points first before I start ripping it into it. First and foremost, I really love just the writing of this show. The poetry, that might sound a little over dramatic, but the back and forth between the actors, there's just such a cleverness and wit to it all that just makes it really engrossing, and it forces you to pay attention because it's very fast and furious. But you have to really pay attention to really drink in all the wonderful writing. And I told you this before the show. I just want to apologize to the listeners. I'm fighting the cold, so if I sound like Harvey Fierstein for the next 30 minutes, you'll understand. I did feel, though, that there was a lot of build-up into this character, so I thought, okay, this is going to be something ongoing, and then at the end, it's like, oh, okay, the last 40 minutes was all for naught. As far as the build-up of the Sam character goes.
Yeah, I thought so too. I was like, wow, if you're a special guest, you are going to be a special guest on one episode of this show.
Yeah, enjoy your one royalty check. That just sort of confused me. Now, I know on some levels maybe they were doing that to keep the element of guessing, you never know who's going to live or die, the Walking Dead element of the show that keeps people paying attention to the characters because you never know what's going to happen to them, which I totally get. But for a second episode out, to spend all this time building up this character, to have it go, and we're done with that. Stay tuned for next week's episode. I just didn't quite buy into it as maybe they were hoping I would. Again, I don't want to sound too down on the show because I really do love it, and I love what they're building to and the back and forth between all the characters. I was just a little thrown back by how it ended. But again, maybe that's what they were going for.
Yeah, I thought he was an interesting character too, because I would have liked to. It was a character I would have liked to have seen more of because I thought he was pretty interesting to have a character that had known Eddie since way back in the day. I thought was kind of a cool thing. But one of the first things I know what you mean about having to really pay close attention to the dialogue. I was so glad I have it on my DVR because I had to rewind like a whole bunch of times to go, what'd they say? What was that?
Oh, yeah. I've had to DVR both episodes, and even if I'm watching it in the future, I'm still going to DVR it because it really does go very fast and furious. Again, which is one of the things I like about the show, and the wording and the wit. But you really do have to be locked in and paying attention, and you can't be on your phone and watching this out of the corner of your eye because you will miss so much. Mainly like a character you thought was going to live, die. I found that I do find the language of the show very compelling, and if you haven't seen the show yet, one, you should, otherwise our podcasts aren't going to make any sense. But two, it's just a really cleverly written show, and I'm always a big fan of big cast and dialogue that goes back and forth, very smartly written, and this show is really well done on that front.
Yeah. I thought it was interesting towards the beginning where they were talking about this navigation device, and I think it was Sam Valentine. He said, I I thought that we assumed that measuring longitude could never be done, and I was like, nobody thinks like that anymore. We just go. Now, I mean, that's part of why we don't get as excited about technology as we used to, because now we just assume everything can be done. And back then they didn't. They were like, this will never be done. And now it's like, I need a robot that cleans the floor. Oh, okay. Yeah, we don't have that yet? Well, when's it going to be here? Come on.
Will someone get cracking? Expect me to sweep my own floor like a bloody pirate?
You're right.
I think that's a great point, because with the advancements that we've made as a society in the last 20 years are far greater than any leap in any time in history. I think back then they look at it as this wonderment of what is capable, whereas we really do, especially as Americans, we just almost take it for granted, like, well, why hasn't somebody invented that app yet? Or why hasn't somebody got cooking on that? That's a great thought that I never thought about when I was watching the episode.
Yeah, and I think it because now we just every time I think, there should be an app for that, there's already an app for that, and I just thought that was an interesting take where they just assumed that nobody would ever be able to measure longitude, which just seems like something so obvious now, of course.
Yeah, and that's a really good point. Especially in that time period, there really is a wonderment to it all. There isn't, I think. As modern day people looking back on stories like this, we think of anything, pre-1960 as pure savagery. Where in the time there is this, almost everything lays before us. It's just a matter of how do we do it. There is that element to the society and the people, and especially in the Lowell character, and to a certain degree with Blackbeard as well. I think that's what makes the two of them so similar, and also just great contrast to one another, and to see that element that we don't normally think about of this time period, of this era of people embracing science, which really we could use a little bit more these days if you watch Fox News. But it's just fun to see that element, and it's a side of that time period that we just don't think about.
I think my favorite scene in this one was the scene with the sponges, which was a crafty way of introducing prostitutes, I think. What are these for? Bastard thwarting. I was like, that's awesome. And then she stuffs it in her hand. I'm like, am I watching HBO? 'Cause
You talk about dialogue you have to rewind. I actually had to rewind that whole scene to did I take that the way I'm supposed to? Rewind.
Right, yeah.
I got it. I did get it. Good for me.
Yeah, that was an interesting scene. And I mean the only reason they needed to introduce the prostitutes was because that's who sets the plan in motion. And I was caught off guard by the plan. I was literally caught off guard. When it turned out to be Blackbeard, planning his own unarmed duel in the thing, because I thought it maybe was Yasima, his lady interest there.
Sure.
Yeah, I thought maybe it was her. We were going to get some treachery or something like that, and then it turned out to be him. And then my next thought was like, are we going to do this in every episode? Are we going to, is there going to be this sort of formulaic twist in every episode? Because I think by episode 5, they'll start to be pretty easy to figure out.
That is a fear I have of the show as well. But I will say this: I loved that element. I was talking about some of the things I didn't care for as much in this episode, but that was the thing I really loved about this episode, was that you weren't sure who was behind it. You weren't sure who was the motivation, and we were talking about favorite scenes. Mine was at the end when she's talking to Blackbeard, and she says all that stuff about, well, hey, don't ever put yourself in harm's way again. And he says, I still haven't. I just thought it was like, yay, Blackbeard, I want to root for that guy. John Malkovich and your awesome evilness. I'm cheering for you, yay.
And the unarmed fight scene was really impressive. That was one of the better fight scenes I've seen. And I always marvel at the way they film fight scenes, because they film the cuts are so fast that nothing is actually connecting with anybody, and they just, through movie magic, they make it look like everybody's getting the crap beat out of them constantly.
Oh yeah, especially in comparison to stuff we probably grew up on, the fight scenes in Knight Rider and Fall Guy, where it looks so telegraphed. Especially in a show like this, where it's not just the fisticuffs, it's swords, it's lanterns, it's a a tabletop full of skulls, whatever John Malkovich chooses to fight with that episode.
Because really, who doesn't have a tabletop full of skulls sitting around?
Oh, I know what I want for Christmas. Can't wait to bring the ladies back to my pad. What? They're paper top holders. But yeah, the back and forth between all three of them in that scene and the action that's going back and forth was just fantastic. And yeah, don't mess with John Malkovich. I think that's the moral of the message of this episode.
Yeah, no kidding. Well, that's what I think. I think they brought a lot of the power back to the character in doing that they could maybe had sloughed off a little bit in the first episode. I thought that was cool. I was really glad to see them do backstory without resorting to Lost style flashbacks, because I thought for sure they were going to do that when they started doing exposition stuff. I thought, we're going to see flashbacks. And they didn't do that, so I was kind of glad to see that.
Yeah, they did it sparingly in the first episode, and I like that as a device, but it can be a little overwhelming and to the point where you start to lose track of, well, where are we in the story? And yeah. I like the fact that they didn't have to resort to that as much in this episode, that they can actually have people talking back and forth and not make it sound like exposition, where it sounds like an actual conversation, because that's in television and especially in film, that's something that drives me crazy, where you're clearly, all right, we are saying this because the audience needs to know this about this, this, and this, and it will lead to eventually this, and it's just, it takes you out of the moment. And that's another plus to the writing of this show, is that they trust the writers to let the characters tell the story with the dialogue they write, and again, it's just really cleverly done.
Yeah. What I kind of liked and was irritated by at the same time, because I thought I was stupid, was that there was some of the things they were bringing up were like, I don't know what a hell burner is. I need a couple. I'm like, I don't know what a hell burner is. And then when they got to explaining it, I was like, oh, nobody knows what a hell burner is. I'm not the stupid one. I almost hit pause and went to Wikipedia. And I was like, no, I'll wait it out and see what happens.
No, I'm sure half the viewers were Googling hell burner into their cell phone.
Yeah, right.
And I'm glad you said that, because you're way more educated on pirates, as you showed on the last episode, so I didn't feel bad, like, oh, man, that's going to be something Phil knows that I don't, and how did I... Damn it.
That's why I felt like I should know what a hell burner is, and then as soon as they explained it, I was like, oh, that makes sense.
And hell burner just sounds a lot better than big exploding boat.
Yeah, exactly. I need a couple of big exploding boats.
Which I think was what Michael Bay would call it, a big exploding boat.
Right. Oh, yeah. No, it's Michael Bay would call that a plot. Are you kidding? But they never
plot,
did.
Outline and title. This summer, big exploding.
Yeah, that's the next Michael Bay film right there. Big exploding boat coming this summer.
Starring guy you saw in that other thing.
Yeah, I was glad when they explained some of that stuff, because I was like, oh, okay, I didn't know. But they never did explain quite, that's going to be a further plot point. What does he need these big exploding boats for? Because they kind of alluded to a few different reasons why he might want it, but they never really settled on one. So I guess in the next episode, it looks like we're finally going to get off the island, and now it sounds like we're talking about Lost again. Yeah. It sounds like they're finally going to get off the island and get on some open water in a ship, which is weird to have 2 episodes of a pirate show with almost no ships in them so far.
Yeah, other than the first 5 minutes of the first episode, they've all just been hanging out the Club Med of pirate resorts, which is awesome. Who wouldn't want to stay there? But yeah, you kind of want to get these guys on the ocean, and you want to see some buckle swash and some sword play. And again, I wasn't as high on this episode as the first one, but I still like where the story is going and what it's building to. And hopefully, as long as we're not the only 3 people watching this series, we'll get to see all 10 episodes.
We'll see how many downloads of this podcast there are, and that should give us we'll be able to extrapolate a percentage of the population watching the show, which will be 4.
Yeah, I think my little brother's listening. Well, let's talk on that. Have you heard anything as far as like the reviews go or the buzz goes? Anything on Twitter or like what? If this has feet, or if it's just like NBC's like, okay, well, we paid for it, and here comes 10 episodes, hope you like it.
Yeah, most people I've talked to seem to know about the show. My dad knows about the show, so my dad doesn't pay attention to a lot, but he knows about the show. So I imagine other people know about the show. because my dad is not, in the cybersphere at all. And so somebody's talking about it. And so they did a pretty good promotion job of it. And but I don't hear a lot of chatter about it. I did notice they had a Twitter hashtag going during the episode. But since I wasn't watching in real time, I wasn't able. I should drop that hashtag into Twitter and see if anybody was talking about it, because that would be interesting to find out.
Turns out it's just me and Richard.
Yeah, right. It's just the three of us. NBC's going, we've got 3 really diehard guys on this show.
What are the numbers on the show? 3? It's third in the rings? No, we got 3 dudes watching.
Yeah. But the reviews, I didn't read any reviews of the second episode. The first episode was getting kind of so-so reviews, but I think I don't know if there's ever been a first episode of a show that was totally mind-blowing and, Breaking Bad maybe. I'm sure the first episode of the Brady Bunch had mediocre reviews too. I don't know, I just compared the show to the Brady Bunch. That seems odd. They did go to Hawaii once.
They also had a hellburner in episode 2. It was...
Yes, Hellburner. That was the name of the second episode of the Brady Bunch. Yes.
The show had a much darker edge that first season, and then it just sort of went tame. So we can't have people getting killed by pirates? All right, well, bring it back to the family.
Yeah. So did you have a favorite line in this show?
It was probably the line I mentioned earlier about her saying that thing about don't ever put yourself in harm's way, and just Malkovich very gleefully saying, I still haven't. Just that kind of malevolent, devious genius to him. And I should also mention, because with this cold thing, I am now drinking Robitussin like a pirate drinks rum right now.
Nice.
So if I pass out, it's just the medicine. But that was probably my favorite. What about for yourself?
I liked the line where he comes out and he sees Sam Valentine telling tall tales about him, and he goes, "So you don't think the place is big enough?" And he goes, "Well, I did picture it bigger." That was my favorite line. I did picture it bigger. I was torn between that, and it does have a merry ring to it when he was talking about calling himself Commodore.
Yeah, I love that. Now that you mentioned it, that whole exchange when Malkovich walks in on Sam when he's talking to all the other pirates, I thought was just really well done, and I think maybe that's where I thought, like, oh, this is going to be a building relationship, and we're going to see some back and forth, and can they trust each other? And, oh, wait, he's hung.
Yeah, right, yeah. Oh, okay, guess not. All right. Yeah, it does seem like we're going to see an interesting – there's going to be a partnership between Blackbeard and Lowe somewhere where they have to team up against a mutual enemy of some sort, and that's got to be coming somewhere.
Yeah, and it's probably going to be Julian Sands, if not somebody else who comes down the right. But yeah, we can. There's almost already quite a bit of back and forth between them as partnership. Sometimes they're against each other. Sometimes they have obviously their own motives. But you have seen them kind of come together in bits and pieces in the first 2 episodes. And yeah, I agree. I can think it's only going to build to bigger and closer between them as the series progresses.
And once again, needles in his own head. He sewed up his own head wound. That may be a running hook all the way through the episode. Every episode, he has to stick a needle in his head by himself.
That's going to be the Crossbones drinking game. Whenever Malkovich has to jam something into his head, all right, drink up rum, everybody.
Nice.
Oh, he's shaving close enough, rum.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think the next episode could really tie some things together when they, get on the water a little bit. I think we're going to see some dueling action, and apparently from the quick preview during the credits of this one, my prediction is going to be right, and Lowe bangs the quartermaster's wife by episode 3. So, yeah.
Which is actually the name of episode 3.
Yeah. So I was like, oh, there it is. I was right. So, but
she's hung.
Yeah. So I think the next episode, I'm actually looking more forward to the next episode than I was looking forward to this one. So I think it'll be cool. I want to see some ships, man.
The previews, I feel the same way. I'm very much looking forward to this next episode, and the little bits they played at the end of this episode does get you to the island is great, and I get the point of it, and they have to build up the characters, and that's all cool. But now let's get them onto boats. Let's get some swordplay. Get back to the first 5 minutes of episode 1, where it was just like, all right, here we go. Here's some characters. Let them go at it. We'll learn the names later. We want to get them out we want to see some pirating.
Right.
In this pirate series. We want to see bones crossed.
You know, that was the other thing I thought was interesting about the Sam Valentine character was he was basically offering him a deal that would give him enough money to never have to go pirating again. And the guy was like, basically, no, I like pirating. I don't need to retire.
Look, my father was a pirate. His father was a pirate.
Right, yeah.
I mean, it runs in the blood.
I thought that was pretty interesting. He was more devoted to pirating than he was to actually making money, which I'm sure was a motivating factor for a lot of those guys back then. I'm sure there were easier ways to make money than.
No, absolutely. And I think Malkovich even talks about it in the first episode. It's not just we want to make money doing this. We want to make money and have the life that we want. And you can't put a price on freedom and not living under a government's rule. And there's a lot of fascinating elements to that as well. Which and they make sound arguments. You look at the story and like, well, do you want to go work for the king or the queen, or do you want to go be a pirate? Heck, well, I want to go be a pirate. Right.
Well, cool. Why don't we tie this up with some show plugs? Where are you going to be this week?
Coming up, actually, I forgot to mention next week on the last episode that I believe it's July 6th. I will be working in Turlock. I probably should have mentioned that, seeing as you booked the gig.
And, I booked you there, yeah.
And also, I think I misspoke on. I said last episode was July 26th. It was actually July 29th. I will be at the Punchline in San Francisco.
Fantastic, cool. I will be, coming up June 19 to 21, I will be at Snickers in Fort Wayne, Indiana, and Sunday, June 22nd, I will be performing at Fump Fest. That's a Fump Fest. I don't know how you would say that legibly on a microphone. Fump Fest. It's a musical comedy festival in Wheeling, Illinois. That should be a whole bunch of fun. So anyway, I believe that is our episode for this week. You've been listening to the second episode of Being Blackbeard about Crossroads on NBC. And hopefully it all sounds okay. So we will see you guys again next week. Goodbye.
Night.
You've been listening to the Being Blackbeard podcast. Visit us at beingblackbeard.com and be sure to subscribe and give us a 5-star review on iTunes. Arrgh!